What it do, Dream Team? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction video, and this one is about Australia's China problem. What problem does Australia have with China? We're going to find out. Before we do, though, if you happen to enjoy the video, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give the video a like. Also, if you have a video request of your own, I take them one of three ways. In the comment section, you can subscribe to Patreon and request it there. Or in the description section, there's a link where I take premium as well as free requests.
This video is made possible by Shopify, the platform behind Wendover that have grown into some of the world's most developed countries. Australia is unique. Specifically, its economy has developed into something unlike that of any other, and a big player in the story of that economy is China, for better or worse. To understand China's role in Australia and the problem this poses down under, one has to start in a very different place, the United States. If it were not for the US, Australia might not exist. Prior to the American Revolutionary War, Britain would primarily send their prisoners to the American colonies when sentenced to transportation.
Really?
Once the colonies became the independent country of the United States, Britain needed to find a new place to put their convicts, and for that, they chose what is now Sydney.
I knew that they sent their prisoners to Australia. Never knew that they were sending them to the American colonies when they were over America, the 13 original colonies. That's new to me. That's fascinating.
The first fleet of convicts who arrived in Botany Bay were the origins of what is now the country of Australia, and they might not have made the long trek to there if not for the founding of the United States. Beyond just this, the history of Australia and the history of the US are eerily similar and interlinked. The two countries' foundings are offset from each other by 180 years, but parallel significantly. Australia is almost the exact same size as the contiguous United States and even has similar dimensions to the US. Both nations include similarly diverse landscapes and climates, and both started in the East. They then each expanded west, taking over indigenous land, largely fueled by the discovery of gold and its subsequent mining. While the scale is obviously quite different, both nations were quite isolated by distance to the European world, although close to a number of other European colonies. Both nations started with their small British populations and then grew primarily through immigration from English-speaking countries, secondly through immigration from non-English-speaking European countries, and thirdly through immigration from the rest of the world. They even share the same story in the founding of their capital cities. They each built a planned city in a central location between their two major population centers as to not favor one over the other. The similarities go on, but the point is that Australia and the US were largely dealt the same cards, but got vastly different results. The US quickly developed into one of the most politically, economically, and socially powerful countries on Earth, with a population well over 300 million. Australia, however, never grew into more than a small regional power with a small population of just 25 million. Now, Australia is no doubt a highly successful nation. It's among the world's most wealthy countries, the world's most developed countries, it has one of the world's lowest poverty rates, and is one of the highest scoring in the World Happiness Index. What the country is definitively not, though, is a superpower. While you can never forget the role of pure chance, given the similar starting position of both countries, the first thing one has to look at for a reason behind this is Australia's geography. Despite their similar sizes, what differentiates Australia from the US is its desolation. About 35% of the landmass is considered desert, which generally cannot sustain large population centers. There are, of course, exceptions to this, most notably in the Middle East, where huge cities such as Dubai, Doha, and Riyadh sprung up in the middle of deserts, but each of these largely developed as a result of oil booms in their respective countries. While the deserts of Australia do have oil deposits, none of these are at a similar scale to those of the Middle East, have not been significantly exploited, and in addition, it's largely Perth, on the western coast, that has emerged as a hub for oil rather than an inland city. With limited arable land and a harsh climate, the inland of Australia just isn't conducive to most human life. This results in a fairly striking population density map. Just 5 major population centers have emerged: Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth. Each of these is directly on the coast. The largest city in Australia that's not directly on the coast, in fact, is Canberra, the capital, which has a population of just 400,000 and was a planned city, meaning its development cannot be a perfect indicator for the viability of inland life in Australia. Even then, it sits a mere 70 miles or 115 kilometers from the coast. If you're talking about
I just got so much unlivable land, but yeah, I'm sure if Australia was livable, like on in the entire country, they probably have a population similar to America. I don't see why not. I feel like Australia is an incredible country. You saw the statistics, but just most of that land is unlivable. So it's like you got to live towards the coast for most people, and that's why the population is so low for such a big area.
Population centers that are significantly offset from the coast, in the outback as it's called. The largest would probably be Alice Springs, a Northern Territory town of just 24,000. This desolation can be further exemplified by the country's road network. The primary highway linking the population centers of Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide to Perth is just a single two-lane road traversing the southern coast of the country.
Oh, wow.
The same is the case for the Stuart Highway, which serves as the primary link from the south coast to the north coast up the center of the country. It, too, is just a two-lane road. What this all means is that much of Australia's land just doesn't lend itself to the development of large-scale human settlements, leaving it fairly empty. Australia's vastness served a crucial role in developing it into one of the world's wealthiest economies, though. The country is now the world's largest exporter of minerals. It has huge amounts of coal, iron, lead, diamonds, gold, uranium, and more, mostly in its vast open outback. That means that the primary economic activity in Australia's interior is mining, and with natural resources making up a majority of the country's exports, it were these minerals that played a major part in growing Australia into a wealthy economy.
And I believe that most of those minerals that they mined were getting exported over to China, correct?
They also cemented who Australia's economic partners would be. Nearly 30% of Australia's exports go to China, primarily driven by China's significant demand for minerals. China, in fact, in the number one spot, buys more from Australia than the number 2, 3, and 4 countries combined, Japan, the US, and South Korea. Beyond just Chinese companies buying minerals from Australian mining companies to use in their factories, there are also sizable amounts of investment coming in from Chinese companies. Overall, it's safe to say that the Australian mining sector would not be what it is without China, but Australia also relies on the billion people up north to act as customers for another crucial aspect of their economy: education.
What's that?
As strange as it might sound, universities, which in most cases are nonprofits, form a sizable part of the Australian economy, as Australian universities are some of the most successful in the world at attracting international students. The country is home to about 875,000 international students across all types of schools. Now, of course, remember, the entire population of Australia is only about 25 million.
That's crazy.
What that means is that in the entire country, 1 out of every 28 people are international students.
That's
Of
crazy.
these international students, the highest proportion by far are Chinese at 30%. That represents a 250,000 Chinese students studying in Australia. On the flip side, that means that at any given time, 1 out of every 5,000 Chinese people are studying in Australia. Within universities, Chinese make up 10% of the average student body. However, considering they tend to cluster together, certain universities have far higher proportions. At UNSW, the proportion is 23%, at University of Sydney, it's 24%, and numbers are similar at other hotspots. All in all, these Chinese students contribute more than about $10 billion a year to the Australian economy. There are also plenty of other sectors that play a part of China's huge economic influence in
More than 10 billion a year is wild. That's a ton of money.
Australia, such as tourism, manufacturing, services, and more. Given how much the two economies are interlinked, therefore, as China has risen, so too has Australia. This link to the success of one of the biggest economic success stories ever has helped Australia earn an impressive record. It has gone 28 years, since 1991, without a recession. While the rest of the world struggled through the Asian financial crisis, the collapse of the dot-com bubble, and the Great Recession, Australia just kept on going with quarter after quarter after quarter of economic growth. By most measures, in modern history, no developed country has ever gone such a long period without a recession. But this all, of course, has a flip side. Such heavy economic reliance on a country that politically Australia doesn't always agree with is dangerous. An Australian-Chinese trade war would certainly cause a lot more damage down under than up north. At the same time, there are quite a few efforts by China to influence Australia. China has made plenty of attempts to tip politics in the country in their favor. As one small example, Chinese Communist Party run or affiliated WeChat accounts, a popular social network in China, released posts critical and mocking of Australian politician and current Prime Minister Scott Morrison in the run-up to the May 2019 Australian election. Beyond that, the
Wow.
Chinese government has been known to unofficially sponsor certain pro-China, ethnically Chinese candidates for various Australian offices through a variety of methods.
Hey, China said we playing. We finna infiltrate. That's their plan. They said we gonna infiltrate. Put the right people in the right places to tip y'all from. Get away from that American alliance. Get away. Join our alliance. You feel me? We're y'all's biggest customers when it comes to minerals. We're y'all's biggest customers when it comes to students. We help y'all's economy more than America does, so come join us.
In media, China has been known to impart vast control over Chinese language outlets in Australia and responds harshly to criticism through defamation lawsuits and more. On university campuses, the Chinese Communist Party is known to have vast amounts of influence, with accusations that the government has built spy networks within Australian universities to monitor Chinese students and their political views. In one instance, a Chinese student studying in Brisbane participated in a rally supporting the anti-Beijing protests in Hong Kong, and days later, the student's family back in China were visited by the authorities. There is a very clear but unspoken threat by China to Australia. If you make things difficult for us politically, we'll make things difficult for you economically. How things typically work in China is that, in order to achieve business success, even when running a fully private company, one needs to be cozy with the Chinese Communist Party that runs the government. Therefore, even if a Chinese company is fully private, it knows that it needs to act in a way that aligns with China's politics. Of course, while some of China's tools of economic warfare are more traditional, like tariffs, a lot of its influence stems from the actions of the private sector. Any private Chinese company knows that if Australia suddenly took a hard pro-Hong Kong independence stance, for example, the CCP might not be happy about continued business with the country. Australia is therefore in a tricky spot where it's a Western country socially and politically, but in many ways, an Eastern country economically. As a result, taking a political stance against any actions by China comes at a much higher cost than that of a less economically linked country. Australia quite literally cannot afford to lose China. A trade war with China on the scale of the US's would devastate the Australian economy. China no doubt has done wonders for Australia, but the point is that too much reliance on any economy, no matter how strong that economy may be, is a risky strategy. When that strong economy is run by a foreign government that can adjust its flows in an instant, that's even riskier. According to one study run by the Reserve Bank of Australia, if China's GDP contracted by just 5%, that would result in Australia's GDP falling by 2.5%. That is a clear-cut case of economic reliance. So, if Australia wants to keep up its unprecedented period of economic growth, irregardless of how China's doing, diversification is crucial. I know a lot of Wendover Productions viewers are the type of people who already run or would like to run their own businesses, and one of the fastest growing industries out there is, of course, e-commerce. Traditionally,
I'm gonna skip the sponsorship, but he definitely gave us a lot of interesting facts about Australia and China. China definitely helps Australia tremendously when it comes to the economy, and so taking that hit from China, with them deciding not to be customers anymore, would be hurtful, and China failing would be hurtful to Australia. But I mean, Australia does a lot of things. I mean, they export goods that China needs, and I'm sure China has the best deal from Australia. Otherwise, why would they get the exports from Australia? So it seems like Australia offers something that China needs, and China offers something that Australia needs. So they have that relationship economically, or politically. Australia has that relationship, and socially, Australia has that relationship with the West, with the U.S. And so this is very interesting. Enjoyed the video, and if you enjoyed that, also click that next video, subscribe, and get a video like. I'll see you guys on the next one.